Olivia is yesterday's news. She can't keep up with our new AI-driven strategy. Next month, we're terminating her contract, mark my words. She has absolutely no idea it's coming. The voice in the recording was cold, clinical, and unmistakably that of Julian Vance, my boss for the last 18 years. I stared at my laptop screen, my fingers numb against the cool metal of the casing. The video file was a recording of last Friday's executive Zoom call, an online celebration for the company's quarterly awards. Julian was there, a glass of expensive-looking scotch in his hand, his smug face filling the screen as he addressed the other executives. My colleagues, the people I had built this company alongside, were all there in their little digital boxes. Some of them, like Cameron, the CFO, offered a sycophantic chuckle. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes darting away from their webcams. But not a single one of them defended me. The recording had been sent to me late last night by Leo, a bright young analyst I had personally mentored since his first day at Nexus Strategies. The email it was attached to was brief and carefully worded. For your reference, please find the meeting minutes attached. I believe the discussion around the 35 minutes 15 seconds mark is particularly relevant to our future strategy. A hot, acidic wave of nausea washed over me. After 18 years of unwavering commitment to this company, after sacrificing so much to help build it, this was my reward. To be dismissed as a relic, a piece of outdated equipment to be discarded. I dragged the playhead back to 35 minutes 15 seconds and listened to Julian's words again, each one a separate, stinging blow. She's completely oblivious. Honestly thinks she's indispensable because of her experience of Just watch. Next month, there will be a new face in her office, and she'll walk right into it with a smile on her face. I had given Nexus Strategies everything. The long nights that turned into early mornings, the missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences for my son, the weekends spent polishing reports so Julian could present them as his own brilliant insights. All of it, for this. I had propped him up, covered for his glaring incompetence, and defended his flimsy MBA-fueled theories when our biggest clients questioned them. This betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal, a deep cut that left me gasping for air. Sleep was an impossibility that night. I lay awake, the glow of the city lights painting patterns on my ceiling, my mind a storm of white-hot rage, crushing humiliation, and something else. Something sharp and cold as ice. Determination. I had raised a son on my own in the city, navigated the grief of losing my husband far too young, and built a career from scratch. If Julian Vance thought I was just some aging employee he could quietly push out the door, he was about to discover how profoundly he had misjudged me. At precisely 7:55 a.m., I walked through the glass doors of Nexus Strategies, just as I had every weekday for the last 18 years. My heart beat a steady, even rhythm against my ribs. My face was a mask of calm professionalism. The office was already humming with its typical Monday morning energy, phones trilling, keyboards clattering, the familiar scent of slightly burnt coffee hanging in the air. Julian's office door was wide open, a deliberate display of his supposed open-door policy. He was leaning back in his expensive ergonomic chair, sharing a laugh with Cameron. I paused for a beat in the doorway, schooling my features. Act normal. Morning, Julian, I said, my voice even, a polite smile fixed on my lips. His gaze flickered towards me, and for a split second, I saw something shift in his eyes. Was it guilt? A flicker of hesitation? No. It was pure, unadulterated arrogance. He grinned, the picture of a man without a care in the world. Olivia, good weekend? I nodded, letting my smile widen just a fraction. A great weekend, thank you. Feeling recharged and ready for another productive month. He smirked, a self-satisfied expression that made my stomach clench. That's what I like to hear. I held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary. I bet it is. I turned and walked toward my desk, the low hum of the office a backdrop to the war that had just been silently declared. The long game had begun. For the next 4 weeks, I was the model employee, the very picture of dedication. I was proactive in meetings, offered innovative solutions to problems Julian couldn't solve, and took on extra workloads without a single complaint. I stayed late, my desk light one of the last to go out each evening. But beneath the surface of this flawless performance, a different kind of work was being done. I began meticulously collecting my arsenal. Every project I had spearheaded, every strategy one had conceived, every successful campaign Julian had claimed as his own. I backed up the original proposals, the data, the final reports to a personal cloud drive. I highlighted the sections that detailed my unique analytical methods, the personal connections that had secured the deals. I wasn't just collecting files, I was reclaiming the proof of my own value. During a routine call with Mr. Hayes, the CEO of our largest client, Viridian Dynamics, I laid the first stone. After we concluded the business portion of our call, I paused. On a more personal note, Mr. Hayes, I began, my tone confidential, I've been doing some thinking about my future career path. I didn't say I was leaving Nexus, not yet. I simply planted a seed of doubt, a subtle hint that I was exploring my options. His response was immediate and concerned, just as I had anticipated. Then, I moved to the next phase. Using the carefully cultivated anonymity of my LinkedIn profile, I reached out to Adrian Croft, the sharp, ambitious CEO of Apex Innovations, Nexus's biggest competitor. My message was discreet, merely expressing an interest in learning about new challenges in the industry. We scheduled a non-official video call for the following week. I wasn't just preparing to be fired. I was methodically dismantling the foundation of trust and stability that Julian took for granted, and I was going to take it all with me. On the morning of what I knew would be my final day, I arrived earlier than usual. Julian still hadn't said a word to me. He was planning to ambush me, to call me into his office with HR present and deliver a hollow speech about restructuring and unfortunate budget cuts. He was blissfully unaware that I was not the prey, but the hunter. I watched him from across the open-plan office, a serene smile on my face that concealed the storm of contempt raging within me. He was so confident, so utterly sure of himself, laughing with Cameron as if it were just another Tuesday. He thought he had already won. But this wasn't just the day I was going to get fired. This was the day his entire world would begin to unravel. The hours crawled by with an agonizing slowness. Emails, reports, conference calls. I performed my duties with a placid efficiency, but I could feel the change in the atmosphere. The furtive glances from colleagues, the hushed whispers that stopped abruptly when I walked past. They were all watching, waiting for the drama to unfold. I kept my posture perfect, my movements deliberate, a portrait of serene ignorance. If they were expecting a scene, expecting tears or desperate pleas, they were about to be sorely disappointed. At precisely 3 p.m., I watched Denise from HR walk toward Julian's office, her expression carefully, unnaturally neutral. She avoided my gaze. A few minutes later, my desk phone chimed with an internal message. Julian Vance, please come to my office at 3:30. There it was. The summons. I took a slow, deep breath, stood, and smoothed down the front of my silk blouse. It was showtime. I knocked once on the heavy oak door before stepping inside, that same polite smile fixed in place. Denise was seated in one of the chairs opposite Julian's desk, a standard issue company folder placed squarely in front of her. It was a painfully familiar tableau. I had seen it play out for others, but I had never been the one in the hot seat. Julian put on his best, "This hurts me more than it hurts you" expression. "Olivia, please, have a seat." I sat, my back straight, my hands resting calmly in my lap. "We deeply appreciate your 18 years of dedication to this company," he began, his voice a measured, rehearsed drone. "But as I'm sure you understand, the industry is changing, and we've been forced to make some very difficult decisions about our staffing structure." I nodded slowly, as if I were hearing this for the very first time. "We've decided to restructure the marketing strategy division, and unfortunately, your position is being eliminated," Julian said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "To ensure a smooth transition for you, we've prepared a generous severance package." Denise pushed the folder across the polished surface of the desk toward me. I didn't move to take it. I saw a flicker of relief in Julian's eyes. He had braced himself for an emotional outburst, for anger or confusion. My placid calm was unnerving him. "I understand," I said, my voice perfectly steady. A shadow of uncertainty crossed his face. This was going too smoothly for him, too easily. He cleared his throat. "We will, of course, need you to return your company laptop and access badge by the end of the day. And naturally, we'll require you to sign a standard non-disclosure agreement regarding all company operations." "Of course." He wanted me to disappear quietly, to be silenced and forgotten. I remained silent, letting him squirm, watching him. He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a tone of mock sincerity. "I know this must be a shock, Olivia," he said, the false sympathy dripping from his words. "But you're a talented professional. I have no doubt you'll land on your feet." My lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "Oh, I have no doubt either." I tilted my head, my expression one of polite inquiry. "Just so I'm perfectly clear, this decision is effective immediately and is final?" Julian blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Yes. Yes, of course." "Perfect," I said, my voice bright. "Then I'll just go wrap up my final tasks." Julian nodded, clearly relieved and eager to have me out of his sight. "We appreciate your professionalism, Olivia." I stood, finally picking up the folder, and flashed them both a brilliant smile. As I walked out of that office, I felt the crushing weight of 18 years of thankless work, of propping up a fraud, simply evaporate, because now, I was finally free. Free to burn his kingdom to the ground. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing exactly what they expected. I packed my personal belongings into a small box, I smiled at my now former colleagues, and I offered polite, meaningless goodbyes. Just another casualty of corporate restructuring. But behind that placid facade, the final piece of my plan was clicking into place. Before logging out of my computer for the last time, I took the opportunity my continued employment afforded me. I archived every critical email, project file, and client contract I had ever worked on. It was all perfectly legal. Then, I composed one last email. It wasn't addressed to Julian. It was addressed to Mr. Hayes, the CEO of Viridian Dynamics, the client that accounted for nearly 40% of Nexus's annual revenue. The message was short, professional, and devastatingly effective. "Dear Mr. Hayes, I am writing to thank you personally for your partnership and trust over these many years. Per Nexus Strategies Directive, my employment with the company is ending today. I'm sure a successor for my role will be in touch with you shortly. I wish you and Viridian Dynamics all the best for the future." I hit send. That email wasn't just a goodbye. It was the first tremor of the earthquake that was about to bring Julian's world crashing down. At exactly 5 p.m., I walked out of the Nexus Strategies building for the final time. I didn't look back. There was no need. The morning after my termination, I was woken by the insistent buzzing of my personal cell phone. I glanced at the screen, a blocked number. I already knew who it was. I let the call go to voicemail, then leaned back against my pillows, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across my face. The fallout was beginning, and far sooner than I had anticipated. By 10 a.m., there were 3 missed calls from Nexus's main line. By noon, a frantic text message from Leo arrived. "Olivia, I don't know what you did, but the entire office is in total meltdown. Mr. Hayes just pulled Viridian's contract. Julian is losing his mind." I laughed, a real, unrestrained laugh. Mr. Hayes, a man who valued loyalty and stability above all else, had seen the writing on the wall. No Olivia meant no steady hand at the helm. No reason to stay. Julian had believed I was just a cog in his machine, easily replaced. He was about to learn that I had been the engine. At 2:30 p.m., the blocked number called again. This time, I answered, keeping my voice cool and placid. "Hello?" There was a sharp, frustrated sigh on the other end of the line. "Olivia?" Julian's voice was stretched thin, tight with a barely controlled panic. I just got off the phone with Robert Hayes. He mentioned you reached out to him yesterday." "I did," I replied simply. A beat of strained silence. He wasn't accustomed to this calm, unbothered version of me. "Listen," he tried, forcing a nervous chuckle. "I think there's been a major miscommunication here. Robert seems to have gotten the impression that you were let go. He's spooked. I need you to help me clear this up with him." There it was. The desperate plea disguised as a command. He wanted me to fix the mess he had created. I leaned back in my chair at my home desk, picking up a pen and twirling it between my fingers. "Julian," I said, my voice smooth as glass, "you told the entire executive team I was yesterday's news and that I couldn't keep up a dot. Why on earth would you need my help now?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear his sharp intake of breath. He knew I had heard him. Olivia, he started again, his voice now cautious, wary. That was just, you know how it is. Locker room talk among the execs. I cut him off, my tone dangerously light. I don't hold grudges, Julian, I said, enjoying the sound of his ragged breathing. I just make smart business decisions. It appears Mr. Hayes does too. I could practically hear his teeth grinding. Are you working for someone else already? The desperation was leaking through his carefully constructed facade. He was scrambling, trying to understand my next move. I smiled. I don't see how my employment status is relevant to you anymore. A long, tense pause. This is not a smart move, Olivia, he finally said, his voice dropping to a low growl. This is a small industry. You don't want to start burning bridges. The threat. So predictable. He still believed he was the one holding all the cards. And that was his fatal mistake. After hanging up, I didn't waste a moment. Julian was just the first domino. I pulled out the notes I had been compiling for the past month. For 4 weeks, I had been in discreet, off-the-record conversations with his most feared competitors. The one that had shown the most interest, however, was Apex Innovations. At 4 p.m. that same day, I walked into the sleek, modern lobby of Apex's downtown office tower. The receptionist greeted me by name. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across a polished mahogany table from Adrian Croft. I'll be direct, Olivia, Adrian said, leaning forward, his gaze sharp and intelligent. The moment I heard you were a free agent, I had my team on high alert. And after the news about Viridian Dynamics this morning, I think it's safe to say Julian's ship is taking on water fast. I offered a small, knowing smile. And you want to make sure you're the one to salvage the cargo? He smirked. I want to make sure we both come out on top. I knew a job offer was on the table, but I wasn't there for a simple job. I was there for a partnership. I slid the file I had prepared across the table. These, I said, my voice firm, are market projections based on my intimate knowledge of Nexus's key accounts, including their contract renewal dates, their pricing vulnerabilities, and the weaknesses in their service delivery. If you want to acquire their market share, this is your roadmap. Adrian's eyes scanned the pages, his expression shifting from interest to predatory satisfaction. He looked up at me, a new respect in his eyes. I assume this roadmap comes with a price? My smile widened. I'm not looking for a price, Adrian. I'm looking for a position. His grin matched mine. Let's talk terms. By the time I left that office, the deal was done. I wasn't just joining Apex Innovations. I was being brought on as a senior partner, tasked with leading the charge to absorb Nexus's client base. Julian wasn't just going to lose a few contracts. He was about to be systematically dismantled. And the most beautiful part of it all? He still had no idea what was really coming. By Monday morning, the first wave of the storm made landfall. As soon as the doors opened at Nexus Strategies, their servers were hit with a flood of contract termination notices. 3 more major clients, all of whom I had personally cultivated and managed for over a decade, had jumped ship to Apex Innovations. We had moved with surgical precision, faster than Julian could have ever imagined. And I was watching the glorious implosion from my new command center. At 8:15 a.m., a text from Leo flashed on my screen. Holy hell, Olivia. Julian just stormed through the office. Looks like he hasn't slept in days. I think he might actually explode. I smirked. Good. Let him sweat. By 9 a.m., the initial cracks in his empire were becoming gaping chasms. Cameron had reportedly locked himself in his office, desperately trying to calculate the financial devastation. The legal department was in a frenzy, searching for loopholes in contracts that were ironclad because I had been the one to draft them. And Julian. Julian was frantically calling every contact he had, begging, pleading, and making promises he couldn't possibly keep. It was far too late. The word was out. Nexus Strategies was unstable. And the worst part for Julian was that he couldn't prove I was behind it. I hadn't broken any agreements. I had simply accepted a new job. At noon, my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered. Olivia? Julian's voice was ragged, frayed at the edges. I leaned back in my new, far more comfortable, executive chair. Julian. To what do I owe the pleasure? He let out a sharp, ragged breath. I don't know what the hell you're telling people, but we have a catastrophic problem over here. I feigned mild interest. Oh. What seems to be the trouble? You know damn well what the trouble is, he snapped. Viridian is gone, and now 3 other cornerstone accounts have pulled out. That's millions in revenue, gone overnight. I need you to tell me the truth, did you? He couldn't bring himself to say it, to admit I had outmaneuvered him so completely. Did I orchestrate this? I finished for him, letting the question hang in the air. I let the silence stretch, imagining him stewing in his own impotent fury. Then, I said, calmly, I no longer work for Nexus Strategies, Julian. Your company's fortunes are not my concern. AB. You're at Apex, aren't you? He accused, his voice dripping with venom. I smiled. Again, I don't see how that's relevant to you. I heard him curse, a low, vicious sound. You're making a terrible mistake, Olivia. I will make sure everyone in this industry knows what you've done. I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of any humor. Julian, you burned that bridge yourself. You did it the moment you stood in front of your executive team and called me yesterday's news. Silence. Complete and utter silence on his end. And then, for the very first time, I heard it. Underneath the anger, underneath the bluster, was a clear, unmistakable note of fear. He finally understood. This wasn't just bad luck. This was me. And I was just getting started. At 3 p.m., another text from Leo. Emergency board meeting has been called. The investors are in a full-blown panic. Word is, they're talking about replacing Julian. A wave of pure, unadulterated satisfaction washed over me. That had been the endgame all along. For years, Julian had hidden his incompetence behind my success. Now, with me gone, the emperor had no clothes. And in the cutthroat world of corporate finance, nothing terrifies investors more than a naked, failing emperor. The next morning, I made my final move. I walked into the Nexus Strategies office, not as an employee, but as a ghost from Julian's past, come to haunt him. The air in the office was thick with a tense, funeral-like silence. Heads turned as I walked past desks, my heels clicking on the polished floor. Whispers followed in my wake. They knew. They all knew. I stopped at Julian's office and knocked once. Come in, a gruff, exhausted voice answered. I stepped inside. He was a wreck. He sat slumped at his desk, his tie askew, dark circles like bruises under his eyes. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by the hollowed-out look of a defeated man. I closed the door gently behind me and sat in the same chair he had fired me from just 1 week ago. How are things, Julian? I asked, my voice light. His jaw tightened. Cut the crap, Olivia. What do you want? I tilted my head. Me? I don't want anything. I just came to see how you were holding up. He let out a bitter, joyless laugh. You know perfectly well how I'm holding up. I smiled. I certainly did. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the fight finally draining out of him. Look, he said, his voice barely a whisper. If there's a way to fix this, to make it right, what would it take? There it was. The white flag of surrender. I leaned forward, my voice soft but laced with steel. There's no fixing this, Julian. His eyes hardened for a moment. So you think you've won? I stood, smoothing the front of my blazer. I don't think I've won. I know I have. I turned to leave, but paused at the door, looking back at the man who had so carelessly tried to destroy my life. Enjoy unemployment, Julian. And with that, I walked away, leaving him alone in the smoldering ruins of the empire he thought was invincible. Julian thought he could contain the fallout. A few frantic phone calls, some empty promises he believed he could stop the bleeding. But by the end of that week, Nexus Strategies wasn't just bleeding. It was hemorrhaging. And the entire financial world was watching it happen in real time. On Friday morning, the headlines were everywhere. Client exodus rocks Nexus Strategies, Vance's leadership in question. Apex Innovations poaches key accounts in major strategic upset. The end of an era? Inside the imminent collapse of Nexus. Every major business journal and financial blog was covering the story, and I was sitting in my spacious new corner office at Apex, sipping a perfectly brewed coffee, watching the empire Julian had built on my back crumble into dust. At 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Leo. You are not going to believe this. It's official. They're forcing Julian out. I smiled to myself. Right on schedule. At 1 p.m., the Nexus board convened their emergency meeting. For the past week, Julian had been spiraling, but now his time was up. Gentlemen, he had apparently started, trying to muster his old bravado. I know things look challenging, but I have a 5-point plan to turn this around. Julian, one of the senior board members, cut him off, his voice like ice. We've already spoken with the lead investors. This is not a negotiation. Julian's smirk finally dissolved. We've lost a quarter of our revenue in 1 week, our stock has plummeted 23%, and Apex Innovations has made us look like amateurs. Do you have any idea the scale of the damage you've caused? Julian's face reportedly turned dark. You think this is my fault? A harsh laugh echoed from the other end of the conference table. You fired the one person who was actually holding this company together, another board member stated bluntly. And now, she's using the very strategies she built for us to tear you apart. His hands balled into fists under the table. He knew it was true. And there was nothing he could do. At 3 p.m., the internal memo was distributed company-wide. Effective immediately, Julian Vance has stepped down from his position at Nexus Strategies. An interim leadership team will be announced shortly. I read the email forward from Leo twice, savoring each word. Fired. Publicly humiliated. Gone. And yet, my plan wasn't quite complete. At 5:30 p.m., an email landed in my inbox. The sender was Julian Vance. The subject, we need to talk. Oh, this was the moment I had been waiting for. I opened it. Olivia, I think we can both agree things have gotten out of hand. I know we've had our differences, but we were colleagues for a long time. I know you're behind this. I think it's time we put it to rest. Let's meet. Desperate. Predictable. Pathetic. I clicked reply. Julian, there is nothing to discuss. As I told you before, this isn't fixable. Enjoy your weekend. I hit send, archiving the conversation. And just like that, the final chapter of Julian Vance's career was closed. But my story was just beginning. The storm had passed, leaving wreckage in its wake. Julian Vance was finished, his reputation in tatters, and Nexus Strategies was a sinking ship. But me? I was thriving. On Monday morning, I walked into Apex Innovations headquarters as their newest senior partner. It was a position I hadn't schemed for, but had earned. Earned with 18 years of hard work, expertise, and now, a flawlessly executed corporate takeover. Adrian greeted me in the executive lounge, a wide grin on his face and a firm handshake. Welcome aboard, officially, Olivia, he said. I hear you've already made quite an impression on the market. I smiled. I like to be efficient. He chuckled. Well, you're precisely what we needed. The clients you've brought over are thrilled. They trust you. They're ready to invest and grow with us. I nodded, a feeling of genuine excitement bubbling up inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a new job. It was a new beginning, on my own terms. But I should have known a man like Julian wouldn't just vanish into obscurity. Later that afternoon, my new assistant knocked on my office door, a hesitant look on her face. Olivia, she said, there's a visitor for you in the lobby. I raised an eyebrow. I don't have any appointments. Who is it? She looked deeply uncomfortable. It's a Julian Vance. I stared at her for a moment, the name hanging in the air. Then I took a slow, steadying breath. Send him in. A few moments later, he walked in. Or rather, a shadow of the man he used to be walked in. The impeccably tailored suit was gone, replaced by something ill-fitting. The arrogant smirk was gone. The air of invincibility had evaporated. His eyes were hollow, his face was gaunt, and for the first time since I'd known him, Julian Vance looked utterly small. I leaned back in my chair, observing him in silence as he stood awkwardly in the middle of my office. He didn't speak. Finally, a dry, humorless chuckle escaped his lips. You really did it, didn't you? I tilted my head, my expression neutral. Did what, Julian? His jaw clenched. You destroyed me. I didn't argue the point. Instead, I said calmly, you destroyed yourself, Julian. He let out a sharp sigh. I underestimated you. I nodded slowly. Yes. You did. A long, heavy silence filled the space between us. Then he said the one thing I never truly expected to hear. I need a job. I almost laughed. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. The man who had called me obsolete, who had mocked me and tried to cast me aside like trash, was now standing in my office, begging for a lifeline. The irony was so rich, so perfect, it was almost overwhelming. I had the power to crush him completely in that moment, to verbally tear him down and make him feel a fraction of the humiliation he'd put me through. But I didn't. Instead, I stood, walked around my desk, and met his defeated gaze. "No, Julian," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You don't need a job. You need a lesson in humility." His eyes flickered with a hint of his old anger, but it died just as quickly. He said nothing. I offered him a small, cold smile. "Good luck, Julian." I then turned, walked back to my desk, and sat down, picking up a report. And just like that, he was dismissed. Forever. That night, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of my new office, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city skyline. Everything felt different. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't just surviving. I was in control. I thought back to that night, staring at the recording, the sting of betrayal, the laughter. I was no longer Olivia, the disposable workhorse. I was Olivia, the woman who had stared into the abyss of corporate backstabbing and refused to fall. The woman who had built her own future from the ashes of another's arrogance. The woman who knew, without a shadow of a doubt, her own worth. I smiled, a real, genuine smile, raised the glass of wine from my desk, and whispered the words Julian Vance never saw coming. "I win."